In the beginning, there was only chaos. From that void emerged the first beings, Gaia, the earth herself, and Uranus, the sky. Together, they birthed the Titans, colossal beings of unimaginable power who would rule the cosmos for ages untold. But this is not their story. This is the story of revolution, of children rising against parents, of a war so vast it shook the foundations of reality itself. This is the story of how Zeus became king of the gods. Our tale begins with Kronos, youngest of the Titans, wielder of the adamantine scythe, lord of time itself. He had overthrown his own father, Uranus, castrating him with that very blade and claiming dominion over all existence. Kronos ruled from the peak of Mount Othrys with absolute authority. Beside him sat the Titan elite, Hyperion, lord of light, Iapetus the piercer, Oceanus, the living sea, and Zeus, master of intellect. The world bowed before them, but Kronos knew something his subjects did not. A prophecy. The same curse that had befallen his father would befall him. One of his own children would rise up and cast him down, just as he had done to Uranus. The wheel of time, which Kronos himself commanded, had decreed his downfall. And Kronos, in his paranoia, devised a solution as brutal as it was simple. He would devour his children. Rhea, queen of the Titans, wife of Kronos, bore him 5 children in succession. Each time, the same horror unfolded. First came Hestia, goddess of the hearth, innocent and pure. Kronos took the infant from Rhea's arms and swallowed her whole. Then Demeter, who would have brought the harvest and life to the world, swallowed. Hera, born to be queen of heaven, swallowed. Hades, dark and powerful even as a newborn, swallowed. And finally Poseidon, wild and tempestuous, swallowed. 5 times Rhea felt her children torn from her. 5 times she heard their cries cut short as they vanished into the void of their father's stomach. She was a mother robbed, a queen powerless, her heart shattered into fragments that could never fully heal. But when she felt the 6th child quickening in her womb, something changed. The grief transformed into rage, the despair into determination. She went to her mother, Gaia, ancient beyond measure, the earth itself, who had seen this cycle before and despised it. No more, Rhea declared. This child will live. This child will be free. And this child will make Kronos pay for what he has done. Gaia smiled. Together, mother and daughter forged a plan. When her time came, Rhea did not go to Kronos' throne room. Instead, she fled across the sea to the island of Crete, to a hidden cave on Mount Ida, where the sound of waves and wind would mask what was to come. There, in darkness and secrecy, Zeus was born. The child emerged with a cry that could have shaken mountains, but the cave held the secret. Rhea held her son, her last hope, her weapon of vengeance. And for the first time in years, she smiled through her tears. But there was no time for joy. Kronos would expect her return. He would demand the child. Rhea took a large stone, roughly the size and weight of an infant. She wrapped it in swaddling clothes, holding it as she had held her other children. Then she returned to Mount Othrys, to her husband's throne. "Another son," she said, her voice hollow with false resignation. Kronos barely looked at the bundle. Without ceremony, without even a glance at his wife's face, he took the stone and swallowed it whole, just as he had the others. He felt it settle in his stomach alongside his imprisoned children and smiled, believing himself safe once more. He had no idea that his doom had already been born. On Crete, Zeus grew in secret. He was nursed by the goat Amalthea, whose milk was said to flow with divine ambrosia. The nymphs of the forest tended him, teaching him the ways of the wild and the secrets of the earth. But the greatest challenge was keeping him hidden. Even as an infant, Zeus's power was immense. When he laughed, thunder rolled across the sky. When he cried, storms gathered. To mask these signs, Gaia enlisted the Curetes, a tribe of warrior dancers. Day and night, they performed around the cave, clashing their bronze shields and spears in wild, ecstatic dances. The noise drowned out the infant god's thunderous cries. Kronos, far away on Othries, heard nothing. Years passed. The child became a youth, and the youth became a man. Zeus grew tall and powerful, his eyes flashing with lightning, his voice carrying the weight of thunder. He learned to hunt, to fight, to think strategically. But most importantly, he learned the truth. The nymphs told him of his siblings, imprisoned in their father's belly, alive but trapped in eternal darkness. They told him of Rhea's sacrifice, of Gaia's plan. They told him who he was and what he was meant to do. Zeus stood at the edge of Crete, looking toward Mount Othries where his father ruled, and he made a vow. I will free my family. I will end the age of Titans, and I will take what is rightfully mine. But he could not do it alone. Zeus sought out Metis, the Titaness of wisdom and cunning, daughter of Oceanus. She was different from the other Titans, thoughtful where they were arrogant, strategic where they were brutal. Help me overthrow Kronos, Zeus said, and I will ensure you have a place in the new order. Metis studied this young god, seeing in him something the Titans lacked, the willingness to plan, to think beyond brute force. She agreed. Together, they crafted a potion, a powerful emetic that would force Kronos to vomit up everything he had swallowed. But getting Kronos to drink it would require deception. Zeus disguised himself as a simple cupbearer and infiltrated Mount Othries. The Titans, in their arrogance, paid no attention to servants. He approached Kronos during a great feast, where the Titan lords celebrated another year of uncontested rule. Wine, my lord, Zeus offered, presenting the cup. Kronos took it without even looking at the bearer's face. He drank deeply, the potion mixing with the wine. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Kronos' eyes went wide. His hand clutched his stomach, and he began to convulse. What happened next would be spoken of for all eternity. Kronos lurched forward, and from his mouth erupted the stone, the same stone Rhea had given him years ago. It struck the ground with a thunderous impact. Then came Poseidon, emerging in a torrent of water and rage, fully grown and powerful. Hades followed, wreathed in shadows and the mists of death. Then Hera, radiant and furious. Demeter, golden as the harvest. And finally Hestia, gentle but resolute. 5 gods stood before their father, free after years of imprisonment in darkness. And standing with them was their brother Zeus, the one who had never been swallowed, the one who had freed them all. The Titans of Othries stared in disbelief. Hyperion's light flickered. Iapetus gripped his spear. Oceanus rose like a tidal wave. But Kronos, recovering from his shock, began to laugh, a terrible, cold sound. You think this changes anything? He bellowed. You are children. We are Titans. We have ruled since before time had meaning. You have freed yourselves only to die together. Zeus stepped forward, lightning crackling around his fists. No, father. Today, your age ends. Today, we take Olympus. And with those words, the greatest war in history began. The 6 siblings fled Mount Othries and claimed Mount Olympus, the tallest peak in Greece, whose summit pierced the heavens themselves. Here they would make their stand. But Zeus knew they couldn't win with just 6 against the full might of the Titans. They needed allies. They needed power. They needed an army. And so the recruitment began. The first to join was unexpected. Styx, the goddess of the river Styx that flowed through the underworld. She was an Oceanid, daughter of Oceanus, but she had seen the cruelty of Titan rule and despised it. "I will side with you," she declared to Zeus, "and I bring with me my children. Nike, goddess of victory, Kratos, god of strength, Bia, goddess of force, and Zealous, god of zeal and rivalry." Zeus clasped her hand. "Your loyalty will never be forgotten. I swear that any oath sworn upon your name will be unbreakable, even to the gods." And so it has been ever since. Next came Themis, Titaness of divine law and order. Unlike her siblings, she valued justice over power. "Kronos rules through fear and tyranny," she said. "That is not order, that is chaos wearing a crown. I will stand with Olympus." She brought with her the concept of divine law, which would become the foundation of Zeus's rule. Then came two brothers, sons of the Titan Iapetus, Prometheus, whose name meant forethought, and Epimetheus, whose name meant afterthought. Prometheus was perhaps the cleverest being in existence, able to see possible futures branching like the paths of a labyrinth. He looked at Zeus and saw potential, dangerous, unpredictable potential, but potential nonetheless. "My brother and I will join your cause," Prometheus announced. "Not because we love you, but because we see that change is necessary. The age of Titans has grown stagnant." Zeus accepted, though he noted the calculating look in Prometheus's eyes. This was an ally who could become a problem later. But for now, he was needed. With their initial allies secured, the Olympians prepared for war. But they were still drastically outnumbered. Hades proved to be a master of strategy, having spent years in darkness learning patience and planning. Poseidon's rage was a force of nature itself. Wherever he struck the ground, springs erupted, and his command over water could reshape battlefields. Hera began to demonstrate powers over the air and sacred oaths, already showing the authority she would one day wield. Demeter's connection to the earth gave them sustenance and the ability to make their base on Olympus flourish. Hestia, though gentle, held the power of the hearth, the center of all civilization, the flame that never dies. And Zeus crackled with raw, untamed power. Lightning danced at his fingertips, thunder followed his words, and the sky itself seemed to obey his moods. But power alone wouldn't win this war. They held a council of war. "We need more than strength," Hades said, his voice like grinding stone. "We need weapons that can match the Titans' raw power. We need forces that can stand against their armies. And we need information," Prometheus added. "The Titans have ruled for eons. They know warfare in ways we don't." Zeus looked at each of his siblings in turn, then at their allies. An idea was forming, dangerous, desperate, but potentially decisive. "There are others imprisoned," Zeus said slowly. Beings Kronos feared so much that he locked them away in Tartarus, in the deepest pit of the underworld. "If we could free them." The Cyclopes, Hades breathed. And the Centimanes, Tartarus, the prison beneath even the underworld. A place of eternal torment where the most dangerous beings in creation were locked away. There, Kronos had imprisoned two groups that threatened his rule. The Cyclopes, three brothers named Brontes, Steripes, and Argesh. They were master craftsmen, each with a single eye that could see the true nature of any material. They could forge weapons of unimaginable power. And the Centimanes, three brothers named Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges. Each had 100 hands and 50 heads, making them living siege weapons of unstoppable force. Kronos had locked them away not because they were evil, but because they were too powerful, too unpredictable. Zeus intended to set them free. The three brothers, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, descended into Tartarus. Hades led the way, already comfortable in the realm that would one day be his domain. The darkness pressed against them like a living thing, and the air itself seemed to scream. They passed the cells of countless horrors, monsters that would one day escape and plague the world, abstract concepts of suffering given form, and things that had no names because they predated language itself. Finally, they reached the deepest cells. The Cyclopes looked up at their visitors with their single eyes. Brontes, whose name meant thunder. Steropes, whose name meant lightning. Argesh, whose name meant brightness. They had been imprisoned for so long that chains had grown into their stone-like flesh. "Who dares disturb us?" Brontes rumbled, his voice like an avalanche. "The sons of your jailer," Zeus replied. "We've come to offer you freedom." Steropes laughed bitterly. "Freedom? We've heard that word before. Your father promised us freedom if we helped him overthrow Uranus. Instead, he feared our power and locked us here." "I am not my father," Zeus said, and lightning crackled through the chamber to prove his point. "Help us overthrow the Titans, forge us weapons worthy of gods, and I swear on the river Styx that you will never be imprisoned again. You will have freedom, honor, and a place in the new order." The three Cyclopes looked at each other. They could see the sincerity in Zeus's words, or perhaps they simply saw a chance for revenge against Kronos. "We accept," Brontes declared. Poseidon shattered their chains with a blow of his fist, and the Cyclopes stood free for the first time in ages. "We will forge you weapons," Argesh promised. "Weapons that will shake the foundations of creation itself." The Cinemanes were even more terrifying. Each stood as tall as a mountain, their 100 hands capable of hurling boulders like pebbles, their 50 heads allowing them to perceive battle in every direction simultaneously. Kata spoke with all 50 mouths at once, creating a discordant chorus. "Why should we trust the sons of Kronos? Why should we fight in another god's war?" Hades stepped forward. "Because whether you fight or not, you're already part of this war. You're Kronos' prisoners, his victims. If he wins, you stay here forever. If we win, you choose your own fate." Briareus's 100 hands flexed, and the sound was like an army donning armor. "And if we choose to destroy you all?" Zeus met the creature's many eyes without flinching. "Then you'd be no different from Kronos, using power to dominate rather than to free. I don't think that's who you are." A long moment passed. Then Gyges, the wisest of the three, spoke. "We have been called monsters, abominations, things too terrible to exist. Perhaps we are, but we would rather be monsters who choose our battles than prisoners forever." Their chains fell away, and the Centimines were free. Deep in the heart of Mount Olympus, the Cyclopes built a forge. Brontes channeled rivers of lava from the earth's core. Steropes gathered lightning from the storms above. Argesh collected starlight, which he compressed into solid form. These were no ordinary smiths. They worked with materials that existed at the boundaries of reality itself, the moments between heartbeats, the space between thoughts, the potential energy of what could be. For 40 days and 40 nights, the hammers rang. The heat was so intense that even the immortal Olympians could not stand near the forge. Only the Cyclopes, immune to heat and cold, could work in such conditions. And then, on the final day, they emerged with 3 weapons. The first was for Zeus, the Master Bolt. It looked like a spear of crystallized lightning, constantly shifting between solid and energy. Brontes presented it with reverence. "This bolt contains the fury of the storm," he explained. "It can shatter mountains, evaporate seas, and crack the sky itself. But beware, such power comes at a cost. Each time you throw it, you must be willing to face the destruction it brings." Zeus took the bolt, and the moment his hand closed around it, thunder rolled across the world. Every mortal on earth looked up in sudden, inexplicable fear. The second weapon was for Poseidon, the trident. Steropes had forged it from the crystallized tears of nymphs, the bones of the first sea creatures, and the pressure of the ocean's deepest trenches. 3 prongs for 3 powers, Steropes explained. To command the seas, to shake the earth, and to stir storms. Where you point this weapon, the world itself will reshape according to your will. Poseidon hefted the trident, and somewhere far away, a tsunami rose and crashed without apparent cause. The third was for Hades, the helm of darkness. Argesh had crafted it from the shadows that exist at the edge of consciousness, the darkness between stars, and the final moments before death. This helm grants invisibility, Argesh said, but more than that, it grants fear. When you wear it, you become not just unseen but unknowable. Enemies will flee from a terror they cannot perceive. Hades placed the helm upon his head and vanished. Even his siblings felt a chill of primal fear, though they could not say why. Armed with these weapons, the 3 brothers stood before their assembled forces. Behind them, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, the 4 children of Styx, Themis and her wisdom, Prometheus and Epimetheus, the 3 Cyclopes, the 3 Cenomanes. It was a small army compared to the legions of Titans, but they had something the Titans lacked: unity of purpose, desperation, and weapons that could kill immortals. Zeus raised the master bolt high. For too long, Kronos has ruled through fear. For too long, the Titans have treated the cosmos as their playground. Today, we show them that even gods can fall. Today, we fight not for power, but for freedom. Today, we go to war. The assembled forces roared their approval, and the sound echoed across the world. On Mount Othrys, Kronos heard that distant roar. He stood from his throne, his eyes blazing with rage. Around him gathered the Titans who had ruled since time began. Hyperion, Lord of Light, whose very presence illuminated the world. He could burn with the intensity of 1,000 suns, and his spear had never missed its target. Iapetus the Piercer, master of mortality and violent death. Where he walked, life ended. His touch could age stone to dust and turn gods mortal. Zeus, titan of intellect and the axis of heaven. He knew the patterns of the stars and could predict his enemies' movements before they made them. Crius, master of the constellations and the southern pillar of heaven. He controlled the cycles of seasons and could freeze time itself in small pockets. Oceanus, the living world sea. His body was the ocean, his power virtually unlimited wherever water existed. Tethys, wife of Oceanus, mother of rivers and springs. She could turn any liquid into a weapon. Thea, Titaness of sight and shining light, whose gaze could blind or grant visions of the future. Mnemosyne, Titaness of memory, who could make armies forget who they were or trap minds in endless loops of past trauma. Phoebe, the prophetic Titaness who could see threads of fate and destiny. And others. Atlas, Prometheus's brother who sided with the Titans. Menoetius, master of violent rage and rash action. Perses, god of destruction. Asteria, goddess of falling stars. Kronos looked upon his assembled might and smiled coldly. They are children playing at revolution, he declared. We have ruled since before the mountains rose. We have power they cannot imagine. We will crush them, scatter their ashes, and then we will ensure no rebellion ever rises again. Atlas, bearing his incredible strength, spoke. Brother Prometheus has betrayed us. Shall we not show mercy if he returns? Kronos' eyes flashed. Mercy is weakness. That is the lesson these children will learn. Any who stand against us will be destroyed, brother or not. The Titans roared their approval, and their war cry shook the foundations of Mount Othrys. Image 34. The world between the two mountains, the battlefield taking shape, storm clouds gathering. The stage was set. Between Mount Olympus and Mount Othrys lay the plains of Thessaly, a vast expanse that would become the greatest battlefield in history. On one side, the forces of Olympus, young, desperate, united. On the other, the forces of Othrys, ancient, powerful, confident. The sky darkened. Lightning began to flash without rain. The earth trembled. And then, with a thunderous crash that could be heard across the world, the Titanomachy, the War of the Titans, began. The first day of the war would be remembered as the Day of Thunder. Zeus led the charge, the master bolt blazing in his hand. Behind him came Poseidon, trident raised high. The Olympians and their allies rushed across the plain toward the Titan lines. Kronos stood at the center of the Titan forces, the adamantine scythe that had castrated Uranus gleaming in his hand. He pointed the blade forward. Destroy them. The armies met with a crash that split the earth. Zeus found himself face to face with Hyperion, the Titan Lord of Light. You're the whelp who dares challenge Titans? Hyperion laughed, and his body blazed with the fire of 1,000 suns. I am the light that reveals all. You are merely a child with a stolen weapon. He hurled spears of pure sunlight at Zeus. Each one could have vaporized a mortal city. But Zeus was no longer the hidden child of Crete. He spun the master bolt and unleashed a barrage of lightning bolts that intercepted each spear in midair. The explosions lit the sky like a second sun. I am Zeus, he roared, son of Kronos, king of Olympus. And your age is over. He hurled the master bolt with all his might. It struck Hyperion in the chest, and the Titan Lord screamed as electricity coursed through his divine form. He fell back, stunned and smoking. The Olympians roared, first blood to Zeus. But Hyperion's fall enraged the other Titans. Oceanus himself rose from his position, his body morphing into a tsunami hundreds of feet high. You dare harm my kin. His voice boomed like the crash of waves. I am the world ocean. I am the source of all water. What is your petty trident against the sea itself? Poseidon planted his trident in the ground, and from it erupted a spring that grew into a geyser, then a river, then a counter-tsunami. You may be the ocean, Poseidon growled, but I am its master. The two waves collided with a crash that sent spray miles into the air. For a moment, the two water gods were locked in stalemate, each trying to overwhelm the other. Then Poseidon did something unexpected. He struck the ground with his trident, and an earthquake tore through the battlefield. The sudden shift in terrain broke Oceanus's concentration, and Poseidon's wave overwhelmed him, sending the ancient Titan tumbling back. Meanwhile, Hades had donned the helm of darkness and vanished from sight. He moved through the battlefield like a shadow, impossible to track. Iapetus the Piercer was cutting through Olympian forces, his touch aging warriors to dust. He seemed unstoppable, until Hades appeared behind him. The sudden presence of death incarnate, the terror of the helm washing over him. Even Iapetus, master of mortality, felt fear. He spun, but Hades's sword was already in motion. The blade caught Iapetus across the arm, drawing ichor, the golden blood of immortals. It was the first time the piercer had been wounded in living memory. How? Iapetus snarled. You're the master of death, Hades said coldly, vanishing again. But I am death. Hera proved to be more formidable than anyone expected. While her brothers wielded obvious power, Hera's strength was subtle but devastating. She faced Tethys, who commanded all the world's rivers and springs. Tethys sent torrents of water at Hera, enough to drown armies. But Hera raised her hands, and the air itself became her weapon. She created vacuum pockets that caused the water to evaporate instantly, then used the resulting steam as a weapon, superheating it and directing it back at Tethys. "You control water," Hera said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "But water obeys the air. Everything obeys the Queen of Heaven." The statement was presumptuous. She wasn't queen yet, but the power behind it was real. Tethys fell back, scalded and shocked. Demeter struck the earth with her hands, and the battlefield itself became her ally. Massive roots erupted, entangling Titan warriors. Vines grew at impossible speeds, dragging enemies down. Crius, master of the constellations, tried to freeze time around her, but Demeter's connection to the earth, to growth and the relentless march of seasons, made her resistant to temporal manipulation. "You control the stars," she said as plants wrapped around Crius's legs, "but I control what grows beneath them, and growth cannot be stopped." But the true game-changers were the Cinemanes. Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges waded into the Titan lines like living natural disasters. Each of their 100 hands grabbed boulders, trees, or anything available, and they hurled them with devastating accuracy. A single Hecatoncheir could fight like an army. 3 of them were unstoppable. Atlas, the strongest of the Titans, tried to stand against them. He caught boulders mid-flight, his incredible strength allowing him to match 3 of their hands each. But 3 against 300 was not a fair fight. Eventually, even Atlas was driven back under the sheer volume of projectiles. Prometheus and Epimetheus fought with cunning rather than raw power. Prometheus could see seconds into the future, predicting enemy movements. Epimetheus, despite his name meaning afterthought, learned from every mistake instantly. Together, they were nearly impossible to hit. They dismantled Titan battle formations, targeted commanders, and created chaos that allowed the smaller Olympian forces to punch above their weight. Themis demonstrated that law itself could be a weapon when she declared a Titan's action unlawful by divine right. Golden chains of cosmic justice would manifest, binding the offender. The Titans, who had ruled through might rather than right, found themselves vulnerable to her judgments in ways they never expected. Nike, goddess of victory, flew above the battlefield on golden wings. Wherever she passed, the Olympian forces fought with supernatural skill and fervor. Her mere presence made victory feel possible, and that belief translated into real power. Her siblings, Kratos, Bia, and Zeus, fought at the front lines, embodiments of strength, force, and rivalry. They challenged Titans to single combat, and, through sheer determination and the power they represented, held their own against beings far older. When the sun set on the first day, both armies retreated to their respective mountains. The plain between them was scarred beyond recognition. Craters where lightning had struck, floods where water gods had battled, burning patches where Hyperion's light had scorched the earth. Neither side had won. Both had casualties, immortals who would eventually heal, but who were out of the fight for now. Zeus stood atop Olympus, looking across the battlefield at Othries, where Kronos surely stood looking back. "This is going to be a long war," Poseidon said quietly. "Yes," Zeus agreed. "But we've proven something today. We've proven we can hurt them." Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. The war ground on with no clear victor. Strategies were devised and countered. Alliances shifted. Small victories were won and lost by both sides. The Titans had greater raw power and numbers, but the Olympians had superior weapons, the Cinemanes, and the element of surprise that came from Hades's invisibility. Prometheus's foresight prevented several Olympian defeats. Mnemosyne's memory manipulation caused several Olympian victories to be forgotten or misremembered, sowing confusion. The world itself began to suffer. The constant divine battles disrupted weather patterns, caused earthquakes, created floods and droughts. Mortals, still primitive in this age, cowered in caves and prayed to powers they barely understood. In the 5th year of the war, Zeus stood alone on the peak of Olympus. He was exhausted. Even immortals could feel weariness when fighting for years without rest. Hades approached from the shadows. We're losing momentum. The Titans can replace their forces faster than we can. Time is on their side. I know, Zeus said quietly. Then what do we do? Zeus was silent for a long moment, watching lightning flash in the distance. Then he spoke. We end it. No more slow war of attrition. We gather everything we have, every ally, every weapon, every ounce of power, and we hit them with everything at once. One final battle. Winner takes all. That's insane, Hades said. If we lose, we were going to lose anyway, Zeus interrupted. At least this way, we go down fighting. But I don't intend to lose, brother. I intend to win, or die trying. Hades looked at his younger brother and saw not the hidden child of Crete, but a true war leader. Then let's make sure we win. On the 10th year of the war, both armies assembled for what everyone knew would be the final battle. On the Olympian side, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, Hestia, the Centaurs standing like mobile fortresses, the Cyclopes ready to fight as well as forge, Styx and her children, Themis, Prometheus and Epimetheus, and countless minor deities who had chosen Olympus over Othries. On the Titan's side, Kronos, wielding the scythe that had overthrown a king, Hyperion, recovered and burning with rage, Atlas, strongest of the strong, Oceanus, vast as the sea itself, and all their kin, dozens of Titans, each a force of nature. The plain between the mountains had been fought over so many times that nothing grew there anymore. It was simply called the battlefield, as if no other battle mattered. Zeus stood before his forces and spoke, his voice carrying to every ear. Today, we end this war, not because we must, but because we choose to. We are not fighting for power, we fight for freedom. Freedom from a king who devours his children. Freedom from tyrants who rule through fear. The Titans believe that age gives them the right to dominate. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, youth and courage triumph over ancient cruelty. Today, we storm Mount Othries, and we do not stop until Kronos himself falls. For Olympus, the army roared as one. For Olympus. Across the field, Kronos raised his scythe. They are insects. They are children playing with weapons they do not understand. We are Titans. We shaped this world. We defined reality. And we will not fall to the weaklings we should have destroyed at birth. Kill them all. Show them the price of rebellion. For eternity, the Titans responded. For eternity. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Two armies, two ages, two philosophies about to collide. Then Zeus hurled the first lightning bolt, and the final battle of the Titanomachy began. What happened next cannot be fully described. Imagine every storm, earthquake, flood, and volcanic eruption in history happening simultaneously. Then multiply that by 1,000. The sky tore open. The earth cracked. Reality itself seemed to buckle under the weight of so much divine power unleashed at once. At the center of the chaos, Zeus and Kronos finally met face to face. I should have swallowed that stone more carefully, Kronos growled. You should have been a better father, Zeus replied. Kronos swung the adamantine scythe, the blade that had wounded Uranus, that had never been blocked or broken. It moved through the air with a sound like the universe tearing. Zeus caught it on the master bolt. The impact created a shockwave that flattened everything within 100 yards. Gods and Titans alike were thrown back. Father and son stood in the epicenter, locked in a contest of strength, lightning crackling against the scythe's edge. "You cannot win," Kronos snarled. "I am time itself. I was here before you, and I will be here after you fall." "Time," Zeus laughed, even as his muscles strained. "Time is exactly what you've run out of." He released the lightning he'd been building up, channeling it through the master bolt directly into Kronos. The Lord of Time screamed as electricity coursed through him. But Zeus couldn't hold him alone. Kronos was too strong, his power too ancient. That's when Poseidon struck from one side, driving his trident into Kronos' flank. And Hades appeared from nowhere, the helm of darkness still active, his sword finding the gap in Kronos' defense. The three brothers, working together, drove Kronos to his knees. "Impossible," Kronos gasped. "I am eternal." "No," Zeus said quietly, standing over his father. "You're just old." With Kronos down, the tide turned decisively. The Centaurs went berserk, their hundreds of hands grabbing titans and hurling them like ragdolls. Cottus grabbed Atlas himself and wrestled the strongest titan to the ground through sheer volume of attacks. Hyperion, trying to rally the titans, was caught by the Cyclopes. Brontes, Steripes, and Argesh, the very beings who had forged Zeus's bolt, turned their power against the Lord of Light. They hit him with his own element, concentrated and amplified beyond what even he could withstand. The light went out of Hyperion's eyes, and he fell. Hera and Demeter combined their powers in a devastating display. Hera froze the moisture in the air, while Demeter caused the earth to rise. Together, they trapped Oceanus in a prison of ice and stone, cutting him off from the water that was his strength. One by one, the Titans fell, not destroyed. Immortals cannot truly die, but defeated, broken, their power spent. Iapetus, pierced by Hades' blade, fell into a coma from which he would not wake for ages. Zeus, his intellect overwhelmed by the chaos, retreated into madness. Crius, frozen in his own time manipulation by Prometheus's cunning. The lesser titans fled, scattering to the corners of the earth, knowing the war was lost. The Olympians showed mercy of a sort. They did not destroy the titans, partly because they couldn't, partly because Zeus decreed it. "We are not conquerors," he declared. "We are liberators." But liberation does not mean letting tyrants go free. The defeated titans were chained, not with ordinary chains, but with bindings forged by the Cyclopes, unbreakable and eternal. They were dragged to Tartarus, to the same prison where the Centaurs and Cyclopes had once been held. Kronos, barely conscious, looked up at Zeus one last time. "You will become what I was," he whispered. "Power corrupts all." "Perhaps," Zeus said, "but I'll do better than you did. I have to." The Titans were cast into Tartarus, and the Centaurs, freed by Zeus and loyal to him, took their place as eternal jailers. The irony was not lost on anyone. The prisoners had become the guards, but one Titan received special punishment. Atlas had fought to the bitter end, even when all was lost. His strength had killed many Olympians, and his loyalty to Kronos was absolute. Zeus admired that loyalty, even as he condemned it. "You will not be imprisoned," Zeus told Atlas. "Instead, you will bear the weight of the sky itself. You will hold up the heavens for eternity, so that the sky and earth never meet again as they did in the time of Uranus. This is your burden and your punishment." Atlas took up his position at the western edge of the world, and the weight of the entire sky settled onto his shoulders. There he stands still, a warning to all who would rebel against Olympus. The war was over. The age of Titans had ended. The age of Olympians had begun. But victory brought new challenges. How do you rule a world you've just conquered? How do you organize divine power? How do you prevent the very tyranny you overthrew? Zeus stood atop Mount Olympus, now the undisputed center of divine power, and faced his first challenge as king. Poseidon spoke first. We three led this war. We three should rule. But how do we divide the cosmos? Who rules what? Hades added, we cannot all be king. That way lies conflict. Zeus nodded. Then we'll leave it to fate. We'll draw lots. 3 domains: the sky, the sea, and the underworld. The earth and Olympus itself will hold in common. It was a risk. Zeus might have ended up with the underworld, forever ruling in darkness. But he believed in fate, and more importantly, he believed in showing his brothers that he was not Kronos. He would not simply take power. They cast the lots. Zeus drew the sky and the right to rule Olympus as king of the gods. Poseidon drew the seas and all waters of the earth. Hades drew the underworld and dominion over the dead. For a moment, there was tension. Hades looked at his lot, the realm of death, forever separated from the light. I did not fight a war to be banished, he said quietly. Zeus clasped his shoulder. You're not banished, brother. You're given the most important duty of all. The living outnumber the dead now, but in time, the dead will outnumber the living by infinity. You will rule the largest kingdom, and you will do it with the honor you showed in war. Hades looked into his brother's eyes and saw sincerity. He nodded slowly. Then I will make the underworld a place of justice, not just death. And so it was decided. Hierarchy forming. Zeus took his place on the throne of Olympus, newly built by the Cyclopes, who had earned their freedom and honor through their service. Around him gathered the Olympians, and the organization of divine power began. Hera, who had proven herself in battle, was named Queen of the Gods and Goddess of Marriage and Family. Though their relationship would be stormy, her power was undeniable. Poseidon took his place as god of the seas, earthquakes, and horses. He would rule from underwater palaces and occasionally visit Olympus. Hades departed for the underworld, where he would build his own kingdom in darkness, but a kingdom nonetheless. Demeter became goddess of the harvest and agriculture, teaching humanity the secrets of farming. Hestia, who valued peace, became goddess of the hearth and home, the center of civilization itself. The allies who had fought for Olympus received their rewards. The Cyclopes were given a permanent home beneath Mount Etna, where they would forge weapons and armor for the gods. They had earned Zeus's eternal gratitude. The Centaurs remained as guards of Tartarus, but they were honored guards, not prisoners. They had a purpose and respect. Styx's loyalty was enshrined in divine law. Any oath sworn on her name became unbreakable, even to the gods. She and her children had places of honor on Olympus. Themis became Zeus's advisor on matters of law and justice, helping to build a system that would, hopefully, prevent future tyranny. Prometheus and Epimetheus received their freedom and gratitude, though Zeus watched Prometheus carefully. The Titan's cleverness was useful but potentially dangerous. Nike, goddess of victory, crowned Zeus with a laurel wreath, and the assembled gods cheered. The war was over. The new age had begun. But Zeus knew the truth that he kept to himself. Winning the war was easy compared to winning the peace. That night, Zeus stood alone. Well, not quite alone. Metis joined him, the Titaness whose counsel had helped him free his siblings all those years ago. You did it, she said simply. We did it, Zeus corrected. This was never just my victory. But it's your responsibility now. Being king, what will you do with it? Zeus was quiet for a long time, looking out over the world he now ruled. I'll try to be better than Kronos, he finally said. I'll try to be fair, to listen, to not let power corrupt me the way it corrupted him. Métis smiled sadly. That's what every king says at the beginning. I know, but I have advantages Kronos didn't have. I have brothers who'll stand up to me, allies who'll question me, and I have you. He looked at her, and there was something more than gratitude in his eyes. Something that would lead to complications, to Athena's eventual birth, to cycles repeating in new ways. But that's another story. And so the Titanomachy ended. 10 years of war, countless battles, the overthrow of one age and the birth of another. Zeus had proven himself not just as a warrior, but as a leader. He had united disparate forces, shown strategic brilliance, and, most importantly, he had won. But Kronos' final words haunted him. You will become what I was. Would he? Could any being with absolute power avoid corruption? Only time would tell. And ironically, time was no longer controlled by Kronos. Time, like everything else, now answered to Zeus. The sun rose on a new world. Mortals, who had cowered during the war, emerged to find the old gods gone and new gods in their place. Would Zeus be a better king than Kronos? Would the Olympians create a better order than the Titans? The answer would unfold over millennia. There would be triumphs and failures, wisdom and folly, justice and tyranny. But on that first morning after the war, anything seemed possible. Zeus, king of the gods, lord of the sky, wielder of the thunderbolt, stood on the peak of Mount Olympus and allowed himself a small smile. He had done it. Against all odds, the swallowed children had defeated their devourer. The young had overthrown the old. The future had conquered the past. The age of Zeus had begun. Zeus's rule would last for eternity, though it would not be without challenges. He would face rebellion from giants in the Gigantomachy, and he would prevail. He would battle Typhon, the most terrible monster ever created, and he would prevail. He would father countless gods and heroes: Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, Dionysus, Perseus, Hercules, and many more. His relationship with Hera would be tumultuous, marked by his infidelities and her rage. His interactions with mortals would be complex, sometimes benevolent, sometimes tyrannical. The stone that Kronos had swallowed, believing it to be Zeus, was placed at Delphi as a monument. It was called the Omphalos, the navel of the world, marking the center of the earth and serving as a reminder of how everything began. Mortals would come to marvel at it, never quite understanding its true significance. Zeus did become a complicated ruler. He was capable of great wisdom and terrible wrath. He upheld justice while committing injustices. He protected humanity while also punishing them harshly. In other words, he became exactly what you'd expect: a being of immense power trying his best to rule fairly while being flawed in fundamentally mortal ways. Was he better than Kronos? Yes, undoubtedly. Did he become a perfect king? No. Gods, like humans, are incapable of perfection. But he tried, and in trying, he shaped the world for thousands of years. The cycle that began with Uranus and continued through Kronos did not continue to Zeus's children. He broke that pattern, partly through cleverness, swallowing Métis before she could bear a son who would overthrow him, partly through better relationships with his children. The prophecy of father being overthrown by son ended with Zeus. He would rule forever, and in Tartarus, Kronos sits still, chained in eternal darkness, knowing that his son succeeded where he failed. Zeus ended the cycle. This is the story of how Zeus became king of the gods, how a baby hidden in a cave became the most powerful being in creation, how a war was fought and won against impossible odds, how a new age began. It's a story of family betrayal and family loyalty, of fear and courage, of tyranny and freedom, of the old giving way to the new. Most importantly, it's a story about power, how it's won, how it's used, and how it changes those who wield it. Zeus won the war for Olympus. But the battle to be a worthy king? That would last forever. And perhaps that's fitting. Perhaps that's what kingship truly is. Not a destination reached, but a challenge faced every single day, for all eternity. The boy who was hidden has become the king who rules. The swallowed children have become the Olympian gods. And the cosmos would never be the same. This is the story of Zeus, the king of gods, the lord of thunder, the one who overthrew the Titans and built a new world from their ruins. And it all began with a mother's love, a stone wrapped in blankets, and the desperate hope that one child might grow strong enough to set his siblings free. From hidden child to eternal king, from desperate rebellion to uncontested rule. This is how Zeus won the war for Olympus. This is how the age of gods began. And the thunder still echoes through the sky, a reminder that the king of Olympus sits on his throne, watching over the world he fought so hard to claim. Thank you for experiencing the story of Zeus and the Titanomachy, the greatest war in mythology, the founding moment of the Olympian age. This tale has been told for thousands of years, changing with each telling, yet always maintaining its core truth, that even the mightiest can fall, and even the youngest can rise. If you enjoyed this journey through Greek mythology, remember to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what other myths you'd like to explore. The Age of Gods is vast and filled with countless stories. This is just the beginning. Until next time, may you face your own titans with the courage of Zeus, the wisdom of Métis, and the loyalty of those who fight beside you.